All right, so joining me now again is Jeanne Martinson. She's a professional speaker and author of War and Peace in the Workplace, which is the book that I have right here. So now I'm sure many can relate to having issues with other coworkers. Do you think this is caused mainly by generational differences?
Well, generational differences is one of the ways that we're different from other people. So we have cultural differences, we have language differences, we have the mindset we have growing up urban or rural. We're like an onion. We have many layers, and any of those layers can create some challenges between ourselves and someone else. But in the workplace, generational differences is more and more we're seeing as being one of the primary challenges, as in how we perceive the world and how we see work and how work should be done.
How do you blend those? You know, if you have the generational differences, how do you try to make that work so that, you know, it can be a positive work environment?
Well, in the work that I do, I primarily go into organizations and do workshops from the senior management down to frontline. And primarily, it's first to understand what are the 4 generational groups and how did they come to be as far as their belief systems. Because it's not really the age you are, but the age you were raised in that creates your value systems around the workplace and relationships in the workplace. So first of all, it's understanding how those 4 groups are different, and then to understand, okay, if I'm a baby boomer or a traditionalist, the oldest generation, how do I need to communicate really effectively with Gen X and Gen Y? And if I'm a Gen X and Gen Y, what are ways that I can build trust with workers who are baby boomers, kind of that 45 up generational groups? So part of it is understanding who we are, part of it is understanding who other people are, and then thirdly having strategies that help us bridge over those generational gaps.
So those would be the 4 that you're talking about.
Yes.
Then. Okay. So where can people find your book?
Online at martrain.org. Also, it's an ebook. You can access it through Kobo, which is an online ebook system, or under smashwords.com for any ebooks if you have iPad or Kindle or whatever it might be.
And you're from Saskatchewan as well?
I am.
Whereabouts?
Regina.
Okay, right here in Regina. All right, well, perfect. Well, thank you for dropping by the show, CTV Morning Live. We appreciate it, and we'll more of live coming up after the break. Stay with us.
The War and Peace book was really about an outcome of research that I had done with many different client groups, Aboriginal groups, different generations, and understanding that when we come to the workplace, we all see the world very differently. Even when you think of, if you have lots of siblings, you don't always get along with your siblings, and yet you have DNA in common and relationships in common, history in common. How much more difficult it is to get along with people we work with that we have nothing in common. And so by understanding what that difference, what those levels of difference are, we can then work more effectively together. So it's understanding how we're different and all the ways we're different that can lead to better workplace relationships.
So do you think that like most work-related disagreements or misunderstandings, I guess, result of like poor communication?
Well, I think in the sense that if I'm working with you and you do something a certain way, I go inside of my head and go, oh, why did he do that? I would only have done that if this was true. And so we ascribe the intention that we would have, or behavior, motivation we would have behind someone else's behavior, and assume that we know why they're doing what they're doing. And so we disconnect fairly quickly as to what we think someone's behavior is motivated by and why they're doing what they're doing, which then I make a judgment about that behavior, and then you make a judgment about my behavior, and down the path we go. So it's really easy to spiral down into dysfunction unless we're really clear on how communication works, how I create my interpretation of your behavior and your interpretation of my behavior, so we can communicate and say, you know, when you did that on Tuesday, I didn't quite figure out why you did that. What was your motivation? Oh, that's why you did it. Well, that makes sense now. So it's about, first of all, recognizing that we don't understand why people do what they do. Sometimes we can make an educated guess and we're right, but not always. And secondly, to open that door of curiosity, as in, why is that happening? Why are you doing what you're doing? To start dialogue.
You've been doing this for some time now. I mean, you've been traveling around and you're a public speaker. Do you notice over time that maybe the ways change a little bit? Like, have you noticed any progress, I guess, maybe with this in other workplace environments?
It has to. There was a time in history where the employer was the one in charge. There was always enough people to hire that if someone didn't work out, they could leave, or you could ask them to leave, and there would be other people there to backfill. So we have 2 dynamics in the workplace today. One, particularly in Saskatchewan, we have a labor shortage still, and particularly in some fields, like technical and trades fields, we have a huge shortage. So it's a leader's responsibility to maintain those relationships so that employees don't leave. So in the context of that workplace communication, we need to understand each other better, both as colleagues and leaders, to make sure that we keep the workplace together. Where in previous times, that if there was conflict in the workplace and people left, so what? We'll find someone else. But now we can't afford to let that employee leave, especially if they have a lot of corporate knowledge, and especially if they have skill sets we can't easily replace. So we need to work on those relationships more than ever before.
So this is very important right now, isn't it?
Yes.